Hello everyone, my name is Steve Murray. I'm the head coach at Health Architects, and today's video is about preparing the nutritional terrain. Now, irrelevant of what program you're on with us, nutrition is one of the foundational aspects we deal with, and getting this process right is incredibly important. And the reason why we refer to it as the terrain, this is one of the areas in healthcare that is full of myths, half-truths, and in some cases just pure fake news. We know that about 20% of nutritional research out there will pass any kind of academic muster at all. So most of what you read or see is not necessarily, has no real relation to the truth. So, how do we deal with nutrition? What is it about? How do we go about that? Well, we knew, healthcare knew, medicine knew back in 2004 that systemic chronic inflammation was the bad guy when it comes to chronic disease. Pretty much all of the chronic diseases we deal with, your cardiovascular disease, heart disease, things like osteoporosis, your neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and dementia, diabetes and all of those issues, and about 13 kinds of cancer. So chronic inflammation is the bad guy. We knew that back in 2004, but there was a problem by then, and that problem was, and this is a really typical human thing. One of the worst things you can do when it comes to designing something is solve the wrong problem. And by 2004, we'd already blamed cholesterol for heart disease, and we'd labeled high cholesterol a disease. We'd blamed fat for obesity and type 2 diabetes, and we'd labeled them both as diseases. We labeled hypertension as a disease. And here's the thing. We had developed incredibly popular and very lucrative chronic medications for every one of these. And to a large extent, when it comes to chronic disease, the problem lies in part to the fact that there are very, very big conflicting interests at play. One of them is obviously big pharma. But unfortunately, that means that the patient is the one that suffers. An interesting statistic that we know of is that it takes about 17 years from when the science becomes generally accepted to a change in clinical practice. So this is one of the massive problems that we sit with, is that we believe that there are medicated ways to be able to solve or treat chronic disease, and we know that that is not true. So, the reason why we talk about a terrain, we kind of refer to it like a pool. If the pool is dirty, it's extremely difficult to do anything, with it. We need to clean the pool, so to speak, before we can really get specific when it comes to individualized treatment plans and programs. So now, if you have not heard my parable of the benevolent aunt yet, you will. Our approach to chronic disease management is actually relatively new, but it's based on really, really good evidence. And that evidence suggests that our DNA is about 1.9 million years old. It hasn't changed for about 1.9 million years, which means that the coding, the genetic coding that our body expects from us. So remember, DNA is much more than just what color eyes you'll have and how tall you'll be, etc. Your DNA is fundamentally responsible for the 7 billion, I don't stutter, it's an actual number, 7 billion chemical reactions that happen in your body every second. Now, like, that's way too many for me. I can't remember what I do after lunch most days. So I'm grateful, that my DNA does that for me. But remember that, like with all systems, it's based on assumptions. So our DNA is essentially, if you think about it, it's like a benevolent aunt. That's the way I like to kind of see it. I'm a visual kind of person. So I picture my DNA as quite a severe, tall lady with a code book in one hand and a set of keys in the other hand. And that code book is essentially the store of 1.9 million years of collective experience. So every time, when we're born, our DNA expects the environment that we are born into to have certain non-negotiables. The sun will rise in the east and set in the west. There'll be 24 hours between days, etc., etc. The temperature in which of the planet will be between X and Y. But much more, in fact, much more than that. And that is where our DNA is. And that coding is critical to determine health. So, what does our benevolent aunt, our ancient DNA, expect from us from a nutritional point of view? If we talk just about nutrition at this point, and the reason why we list these things is that there's a school of thought of which I very much agree with, that suggests that there is a sweet spot for human health, not development, but human health, that occurred about between 10,000 and 40,000 years ago. This is just prior to mass agriculture, and that school of thought says that is when human beings were the most healthy. And that is kind of where our DNA is sitting. That is the expectations that our DNA has of our nutrition. So let's run through them quickly. We're talking about a hunter-gatherer existence when human beings were at the peak of our hunter-gathering lifestyle, and we were starting to settle and starting to get into some kind of agricultural setup. So when it comes to variety, that's the first thing that our DNA expects. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors will eat 100 different foods on a weekly basis. This is not variants of food. I'm talking about 100 completely different foods. We were unmatched foragers, and we moved regularly. We got this massive variety of food. The other thing that happened in a hunter-gatherer world was that the plants that we ate were wild. On the whole, were wild, which meant that they were rich in phytochemicals. Those are the chemicals that wild plants use to fend off pests, which harvested foods and mass harvested foods don't have. They're pesticide free, obviously. The soils were incredibly nutrient rich. Seafood and animal protein was wild, heavy metal free, and antibiotic free. So variety and quality, that's kind of where we were. The next really big one and important one was this, what we call the anti-inflammatory or the inflammatory balance. And our hunter-gatherers would eat a diet that ensured that our balance of pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory foods was about 1-to-1. Now, the reason that's important is that goes to a cellular level. Every cell in the human body is created by fatty acids, all right, which come from omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, if you think about that. And each cell wall has a pro-inflammatory omega-3, anti-inflammatory omega-3 and pro-inflammatory omega-6 piece, which means that the cell wall is supple and it can adapt to various environments, and importantly, nutrients can get into the cell. So our cells were healthy and they were capable of taking in nutrients and excreting waste effectively because of that balance. Whole food. This is really important. Our ancestors would eat, well, obviously without processed food of any kind. Nutrients came from the food in its natural state, and food was eaten immediately. There wasn't the opportunity to store food the way we can today. And the last one is a little bit controversial, although we don't think it should be controversial at all. Human beings are not omnivores or carnivores. We are fruitarians. and we can see that by the way our jaws operate. Our jaws operate sideways. Our jaws do not go up and down. My dog is an omnivore. And if you've seen a dog's jaw, that's an omnivore. Dogs are pure omnivores. Our animal protein intake was, in fact, very, very minimal, about 5 to 10% of total calories. Red meat was rare because red meat had teeth and claws and was faster than us and stronger than us. So it wasn't easy for us to be able to hunt that. So fish and poultry would have been the dominant kind of animal protein, but only in very, very small amounts. Our diet was predominantly plant-based. So that is the expectation of our ancient DNA. Now the question is, obviously, over the last 70 years, we are not talking about, these are changes that are very recent. They're not hundreds of years old. They're in fact less than 100 years old. But they are dramatic and they are radical. And we've got to now determine what is the impact of these nutritional realities that we now find ourselves in. From a variety point of view, we eat between 3 and 10 different foods on a weekly basis. 65% of the world eats the same lunch every day. So even in the early days, we would farm 3,000 crops. Even in the early days of agriculture. Today we farm 20 globally. We have this ability to buy what we want when we want. So there's no seasonal variety. We don't eat seasonally. We eat because we can, and we can go to spa. We can go to wherever we go. All right. From a quality point of view, we're starting to see some real challenges. Our plant foods are factory farmed. The soils are very low in quality, so the foods are then low in nutrients, low in phytochemicals. Our animal protein is factory farmed as well, corn-fed, nutrient poor. Our meat and fish are incredibly contaminated with antibiotics or heavy metals. So our quality of our food is suffering tremendously. Whole food, well, not so much. Our diets are now about between 50 and 75% processed or ultra-processed, which means that the nutrients have been removed, to store. Sugar is ubiquitous, added sugar. Seed oils dominate our food prep, and our dairy products are a staple of our diets. Now, there would be no dairy at all in our hunter-gatherer environment. Now, this knocks onto our inflammatory balance, and this is important. The dominance of omega-6 fatty acids, which comes in all our seed oils, all our fried foods, all our fast foods, and the dramatic reduction of omega-3s, which we would get from fatty, oily fish, for example, and various kinds of fruit and veggies, have changed. So our pro-inflammatory balance is now our balance there, inflammatory and anti-inflammatory, is now 1 to 60. We have 60 pro-inflammatory food molecules versus 1 anti-inflammatory in our diet. This knocks onto our cell walls, which are now dominated by pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, which means that our cell walls are brittle and hard, and nutrients can't even get into the cell when they arrive. So it has a dramatic impact on our bodies, this increase in pro-inflammatory oils. In terms of our plant-based, our ability to farm animals in massive numbers, has just seen our animal protein intake increase massively. It's in fact now the dominant source of calories in our diet. So what does that mean? What do those changes mean? Well, very simply, they drive up our inflammation. Every single one of these, if I go back one, every single one of these changes increases our inflammation. Low food variety increases inflammation. Low food quality increases inflammation, etc., etc. So we're now in a position where we really got one hand tied behind our back at least when we look at how do we go about reducing inflammation. Sorry, I've got the wrong order here. All right. So In terms of our strategy, we are not keto people, paleo people, carnivore people, or any other type of diet people. We are simply whole food people. One of my mentors in this field, one of my people I follow and I really respect is a gentleman called Dr. Robert Lustig. And Dr. Lustig always says, we're fighting the wrong enemy. Our enemy is not keto if you're a paleo person or a carnivore person or whatever. We're fighting the wrong enemy. The enemy is the food industry. The enemy is processed food. And so we're fighting with each other while the enemy gets away scot-free. So we are whole food people, and the reason for that is because the evidence suggests that is correct. So this is what we are going to be working with you on when it comes to a nutritional strategy. When it comes to variety, get curious. Explore the varieties of legumes and different kinds of veg, ancient grains. We encourage you to shop and cook seasonally. Don't shop and cook what you want on the way home from work. Eat seasonally, plan seasonally. Include all the colors on every plate. That's really important when it comes to variety. White, orange, yellow, purple, green. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. So variety, try and increase the variety. When it comes to quality, buy organic whenever you can. Grow as much as you can of food on your own. It's not difficult to do. Procure wild animal protein if possible. Never buy farmed fish. And we do have to supplement what we don't or can't get. That's just a reality. So good, high-quality supplementation is a reality of a modern diet. When it comes to inflammatory imbalance, drop or reduce the seed oils dramatically. Remove or reduce fried food. Learn about which foods are pro and anti-inflammatory in nature. And procure high-quality omega-3 supplement for the rest of your life. That is one of the supplements that we would suggest are non-negotiables. When it comes to whole food, don't eat anything that comes in a bottle or a can. If your food can go bad, it's good for you. If your food can't go bad, it's not good for you. These are simple things. Gluten is just not safe, period. There's absolutely no reason for human beings to eat dairy. And we'll go into this in much more detail, ever. And if you do eat sugar, make sure it comes in the food in which it was originally intended, like fruit. And we'll also go into a reason for that, show you what that means. When it comes to predominantly plant-based, we need very little animal protein. We need about between 0.4 and 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight for females and males. So we're suggesting replace animal protein with plant protein. We'll show you how to do that. The question I always ask people is, how do you think animals got the protein? Where did you think animals that we eat got the protein from in the first place? They got them from plants. So we're simply taking the animal, killing it, and eating the meat when we can just go to the protein that they got from the plants in the first place. So that's really our strategy. What I want to do now is just deal with some of the big whopping sort of fake news, half-truths, myths and legends that happen in nutrition, and there's a bunch. But we want to deal with a couple of the really big ones. The first one, now, if you haven't heard this before, you know someone who has, or someone's told you this before, or someone's been told this before. Eat less, exercise more. That's the pretty standard reaction you get from allopathic medicine, from current medicine, and it is, in our opinion, the biggest lie in medicine. By the way, this little slide next to it here, the fiction, this was an advert run by Coca-Cola at the halftime show during the Super Bowl in 2013. And this is Coca-Cola saying, beating obesity will take action by all of us based on one common sense fact: all calories count, no matter where they come from, including Coca-Cola. Garbage. Kiss garbage. Okay. So let's deal with some of the truths. The first one, all calories are the same, so it doesn't matter where they come from. Absolutely false. In fact, when the first time I did nutrition training back at university in the 90s, that's what we were told. And I told people that all the time until I realized how wrong it was. But the simple issue is that calories from carbs, fats, and proteins are completely different, and our body metabolizes them differently. So calories, where they come from, count. And they're very different. The next falsehood that runs down from that is weight control. If calories are all the same, then weight control is simply a matter of balancing, right? If you take in more calories than you use, you'll put on weight. If you take in less calories than you use, you'll lose weight. And if you take in the same, you'll keep the weight the same. Okay, that's been weight management strategy now for the last 70 years. The truth is, what do we do with what we eat? Say it again. What we do with what we eat is as important as how much you eat. If you eat a traditional Western diet, it may in fact be more important. Now, we're going to go into this in lots of detail during this module, but the principle is how we metabolize various foods. And how do we make that as efficient as possible is a massive part of any nutritional strategy, whether the objective be to lose weight, gain weight, whatever that might be. And let's just run this down in terms of falsehoods. Because it makes it easy, okay, for us to use the "it's your fault," okay, as healthcare professionals. Because if you're overweight, and weight management is simply balance, it's about calories. Therefore, if you're overweight, then gluttony and sloth are the cause, which means it's your fault, which is absolute nonsense. So the simple issue from our perspective is that healthy weight is a byproduct of well-being, not an outcome of simply eating healthily. Say that again. Healthy weight is a byproduct of well-being, not an outcome of changing your diet. It's much more complicated than that. So in terms of our terrain and what pollutes our terrain, chronic and acute inflammation that comes from poor diet and not enough exercise pollutes our terrain. Oxidative stress, which is essentially cell death, okay, comes from chronic and acute stress. And environmental toxicity also pollutes our terrain, which comes from home products and personal products. So that's something that each of these are elements that we'll go into loads of detail with. I want to just, if you want to take away some very simple things from this introduction, here are a couple. And here's the thing, these are simple. I'm not suggesting they're easy. Those are two different words. But here's the thing, if your food can go bad, it's good for you. If your food can't go bad, it's not good for you. Because if your food can't go bad, it means the nutrients have been taken out and processed, and that is why it doesn't rot. So that's a simple truth. The next one, is this one here. If you stop eating food with labels on it, you no longer have to worry about calories. So just think that through. If you stop eating food with labels on it, you no longer have to worry about calories. And we'll go into this in tons of detail. But to give you a simple example, 100 grams of raw potato is around about 86 calories. Kilocalories, by the way. A calorie is actually a kilocalorie, but that's for another discussion. So a potato, medium potato, about 86 kilocalories. The same weight of processed potato chips, 586 kilocalories. That is the cost of processing that particular food. So if you have the potato and not the chips, it's a 500 calorie difference. So this is what we do. And I say we, this is Jenny and I, this is what we do. So from a variety point of view, we use ancient grains like buckwheat, spelt, millet, quinoa, rice, black rice. We use a variety of legumes, black, red, sugar, butter beans, chickpeas. We shop and eat seasonally. We don't shop and eat what we want when we want. And that's also much cheaper, by the way. We prepare only what we have. If we don't have it, we don't necessarily go and buy it. We try new veggies that we find, and we deliberately look for them. From a quality point of view, we grow our own spinach, kale, peppers, chilies, lettuce, broccoli, and herbs. We buy organic whenever we can. We never buy farm fish or farm meat. That's pork, lamb, beef, and salmon. We only buy pasture-raised eggs. That's a big difference from free range. We buy wild-caught fish if we buy fish. The only red meat we eat is wild, and it's venison normally. And we procure fruit directly from farmers, not via the stores. From an inflammatory balance point of view, we take a high-quality omega-3. We don't use any seed oils. We fry with water or broth. We've removed fried foods from our diet. We understand how to use things like sulforaphane and curcumin as supplements. And sulforaphane comes from your cruciferous vegetables, and curcumin from turmeric. We don't eat gluten, so we are gluten-free. We don't eat dairy at all. We use bottled food and canned foods incredibly sparingly from a whole food point of view now. We don't use added sugar. We get sugar from fruit or dates. We never drink soft drinks of any kind. We use oils very sparingly, and we don't blend our veggies because that takes out the fiber. From a predominantly plant-based protein, we eat animal protein less than once a week. We use very small portions, less than 100 grams. Most of our protein comes from plant-based alternatives like tofu, tempeh, and legumes. So that's our plan. So the challenge will be, what will your plan be? Here is, if you want to take a simple snapshot of what to do today to make a difference as we start getting into the program. Here's your daily dozen. Stick this up on the fridge if you want. So if you get 3 portions of beans, 1 portion of berries, 3 portions of other fruits, 1 cruciferous veg, 2 greens, other vegetables, 2 nuts and seeds, flax seeds, spices, whole grains, drinks, and exercise. Every day. Stick it up in the fridge. Tick, tick, tick. Have you got enough protein that comes from beans or animal protein or whatever you want? Have you got 1 portion of berries? So it's a really nice way to say, what do I do today to change my diet effectively before we really get into the weeds as we go along with this module. So I hope that makes sense in terms of setting the terrain for this module, and I'm really excited to work with you on this process and journey ahead.